Okay, I know I've made these points before. I know I've brought them into other videos, but I have to make this video just to counter the abundance of pro-Russian tripe that is online. Um, there's a number of videos that are circulating regarding the Syrian conflict, and they're usually entitled things like "Putin tells everyone who funds ISIS," um, "Russia exposes the West's hypocrisy." These are the sort of titles. And usually they're viral. They have sometimes millions of views and thousands of likes, and there's lots of comments with people praising Tsar Putin and how wise he is and how right he has been about the whole thing. This really pisses me off, and I'll tell you why. Russian hypocrisy. That's it. Summed up, it's the utter hypocrisy of Russia and Russia's position. Um, After the Paris attacks, I made the video talking about how there needs to be an end to finger pointing and so on. And I still stand by that. But I'm concerned that history is going to be written, and it's going to be written by people who are distorting the facts. Um, ISIS may well have inadvertently been supported by the West, and if someone produces evidence to it, I'll even concede that they were directly supported by the West at one point. Okay, I'm yet to see anyone actually produce solid evidence for that. It is true that the West is far too close to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the ideological stronghold of ISIS, i.e., Salafi, Wahhabi thinking. In that, I totally agree. But what really, really pisses me off is those who condemn ISIS, as any sane person should, and yet ignore the brutality of the Assad regime. And this is significant. Since the start of the Syrian civil war, Russia has unapologetically been supporting the Assad regime with arms. This is irrefutable. Um, Russia has denied this. Russia has denied that it is taking sides in the conflict. This is rubbish. Of course it is. And anyone who honestly believes that Russia is only doing this because they're taking a moral position against ISIS is deluded. That's totally delusional. I'll come to that in a minute, actually, because it's questionable if Russia is even taking on ISIS, despite Putin's preaching on the subject. Okay, so Russia has been arming the Assad regime from the start. Ask the average Syrian, and I'm not talking about a Syrian who's too frightened to speak in case of reprisals. I'm talking about a Syrian who has become a refugee and who's come to a Western country. Ask them what they think of Assad. You'll find the majority will not have very kind views on Bashar al-Assad. This is a brutal dictator who has been gassing his own people. An independent inquiries at Gauta found that it was most likely the Syrian government responsible for that atrocity. 1,429 Syrian civilians killed, who has been barrel bombing his own people, who has been torturing his own people, using his Shabiha secret police. This is a thoroughly wicked regime. There is no escaping that fact. Russia has been backing it from the very start. So why is there not people saying, this is the truth about about the Russian position? I honestly believe that a lot of the people commenting on those videos are motivated not because of a dislike of ISIS, but simply because they're blinded by an anti-Western bias. The people will say, I'm biased in favour of the West. That's not true. I have said repeatedly that we have made fundamental mistakes, like being far too close to Saudi Arabia. But it really, really pisses me off that there are still people who are distorting this whole thing. I don't mind people saying the West has got a dubious position in arming rebels if they then say that Russia is also dubious for arming the Assad regime. The truth is, both sides have been fueling this conflict. But back in 2012, when there was going to be action from NATO countries against ISIS, what happened? China and Russia decided to veto that. Now, if their position was because they don't believe in interfering in other countries, as is the Chinese position, okay, you can maybe argue that's a valid position. But the point is, Russia's position is not because they don't believe in interfering in other countries. In fact, Russia takes quite a different stance from China. Russia does, as it has shown in recent months, intervene militarily when it feels it's the right course of action. So you can't say that the Russian position is based on peace. It is not. It's just not. And what really pisses me off is that so many people, and it does make me angry because it is a distortion of the facts. The fact is, Russia has been arming the Assad regime from the very start. The Assad regime within Syria is just as bad as ISIS. They've been murdering women and children with barrel bombs. A good deal of the refugees are fleeing Syria, certainly in recent years because of ISIS. But since the start of the conflict, the refugee crisis was initially caused by the brutality of Assad's regime. And this caricature that Russia has played into, that anyone opposing Assad in Syria must be ISIS, all that does is help ISIS. All it does is aid their propaganda. I mean, to suggest that the various rebel factions that are fighting in Syria are all pro-ISIS is ridiculous. Certainly, there's other unsavory groups. I'm not saying ISIS is the only Islamist group there. There's the Al-Nusra Front. There's various factions of Al-Qaeda. I'm not saying these guys are saints. Far from it. Far from it. But the idea that everyone in Syria opposed to Assad is an ISIS terrorist is a disgraceful distortion of the facts. And what Russia has been doing shamefully is fueling that notion. Now, as for Russia taking a moral position against ISIS and lecturing the West on ISIS, for all that talk, Russia hasn't actually been bombing ISIS positions. They've been bombing positions of rebels opposed to the Assad regime. Like I say, they may not be savoury characters, some of them. There is the Al-Nusra Front, there's Al-Qaeda factions, but the point is they're not bombing Raqqa, which is the ISIS stronghold. So, as far as I'm concerned, the Russian position is totally hypocritical. On one hand, they're lecturing the West for supposedly supporting ISIS, although I'm yet to see solid evidence for this, actual solid, tangible evidence that the West as a policy position is supporting ISIS. I haven't seen it. If someone can produce that, I'll say, okay, that's what we've been doing. But it seems to me a lot of people jump on this bandwagon, oh, the West supports ISIS, without actually looking at the facts, without actually looking at any evidence to support that theory. Ideologically, I suppose when you connect it up, the fact that we've been backing Saudi Arabia, you could argue that yes, we've been backing ISIS. But in terms of actually directly, deliberately fueling ISIS, why the hell would we be deliberately supporting an organization that hates us and that wants to spread a caliphate against the West? That doesn't make any sense. From a foreign policy position, that is nonsensical. Why the hell would any government want to create a situation of internal stability? Now, people will say, oh, it's to keep people in fear and so on. But why would that help them? Because all it does is then makes people point the finger at Western government and say, oh, look, it's your meddling in the region that's caused it. So my point is, it wouldn't favour Western governments to back ISIS. So all I'm saying is that, I'm not saying the West is innocent, but I'm sick and tired of Russia's hypocrisy and Putin's pontificating and the idiot sheep who follow this propaganda, pro-Kremlin propaganda. I'm so fed up with it. If you're going to be critical of the West, fine, go ahead, but at least be consistent in your position. If you're calling yourself a pacifist, then be consistent. Because Russia's role in the Syrian civil war is extremely morally dubious. And when history is written, it will show that Russia supported the murderous Assad regime. That is a fact.